Today, we're going to break down a concept that honestly explains so much, from why your office kitchen is a mess to some of the biggest environmental challenges on the planet. It's called the tragedy of the commons.
And to get our heads around this big idea, we're not going to start with some complex theory. Nope. We're going to start with something I bet is incredibly familiar to a lot of you. Let's call it the dirty fridge phenomenon.
So, let me just ask you, have you ever had to share a kitchen? You know, with roommates, coworkers, maybe even your own family? If you just nodded yes, then congratulations. You're basically already an expert on this topic. You just don't know it yet.
Because you know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Someone spills a little bit of milk and just leaves it there. A container of leftovers gets pushed to the back and starts, well, let's just say it starts evolving. And nobody cleans it. Why? Because hey, it's not their specific mess, right? Everyone just assumes someone else will eventually deal with it. And before you know it, the whole fridge is a total disaster zone, unusable for everybody.
Well, here's the thing. That frustrating, all-too-common dirty fridge, it isn't just a minor annoyance. It is a perfect, bite-sized example of a huge ecological and economic idea. What you're dealing with is a classic tragedy of the commons.
So what does that actually mean? Well, the term was coined by an ecologist named Garrett Hardin, and it describes a situation where a group of people who are all acting perfectly rationally and in their own best interest end up completely destroying a shared, limited resource. The key is that for each person, the immediate benefit of taking a little more is huge, while the cost seems tiny, because that cost is shared by the entire group, and that's what leads to total ruin. Now, to really explain this on a bigger scale, Hardin didn't use a kitchen appliance. He used a much more classic, rustic example, a pasture full of cows. So let's walk through his story.
Okay, so picture this. There's a big, beautiful field of grass. This is our commons. It's totally open to all the local farmers in the area. Anybody can bring their cows to graze here. And here's the best part. No rules, no fees, no limits. It's a perfect shared resource, right? What could possibly go wrong?
Well, here's where the logic gets really interesting. Let's get inside the head of a single farmer. For them, the most logical, rational choice is to add one more cow to the pasture. Why? Simple. That farmer gets 100% of the profit from that extra cow. All the milk, all the money. But the cost, the extra grass that cow eats, that training cost is shared by everyone. So for the individual, the personal gain is massive, and the personal cost is practically zero. The problem, of course, is that every single farmer is thinking the exact same way.
And you can probably see where this is going. Pretty soon, the pasture is just packed with cows. It gets completely overgrazed, the grass withers and dies, and eventually there's nothing left for any of the cows to eat. And so they starve. By each doing what was best for themselves, they ended up destroying the one thing they all needed to survive. That, right there, is the tragedy.
So, why does this happen? Why do these shared resources, whether it's a field of grass or an office fridge, so often end up failing? It really just boils down to two main problems.
On one hand, you've got this problem of unchecked exploitation. You get these free riders, the farmers adding extra cows, or the roommate who never buys milk, who just drain the resource until everyone is worse off. Then on the other hand, you have this huge issue of diffused responsibility. It's just like the dirty fridge. When everyone owns something, it feels like no one owns it. No single person feels like it's their job to take care of it, so it just falls apart.
So the real key here is figuring out what's missing from the equation. The commons fails because there's no one in charge, no regulator to enforce limits. There are no laws governing how it's used. Or, in our first example, there's no fridge cleaning schedule taped to the door. Without some kind of system or management, the tragedy is pretty much guaranteed to happen.
But here is the most important part of this whole thing. Just because we can name the problem doesn't mean we're doomed. This problem is not unsolvable. But recognizing it, well, that's the first step. And it forces us to ask some really tough but necessary questions about how we manage all the stuff that we share.
And that leads us to the first really big question. We're talking about everything from clean air and clean oceans to our public parks, even online resources like Wikipedia. How do we get people to feel a real sense of shared responsibility for these shared goods? How do we make everyone feel like they have a stake in protecting them?
And finally, this is maybe the most urgent question of them all. It's one thing to figure out a solution after everything's already gone wrong, but how do we learn to take care of the pasture before all the grass dies? How do we act right now to protect the resources we're all going to depend on tomorrow?